People don't scale, and computers don't have intuition. But where we've started to get to now is AI can allow us to start having intuition around that to then let people scale.
I'm Nikki Herda, and this is Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms, a podcast where we celebrate our state's educators and explore the future of learning. It can be fascinating and, sometimes a little scary to speculate on the implications that artificial intelligence may have for the future of our society. But in many ways, both small and profound, AI is already transforming the way we interact with media and with one another through companies like Netflix, Amazon, Spotify, and more. In today's episode, I chat with Lou Aronson, the CEO and founder of a company called Discourse Analytics, who shares his perspective on how AI has the potential to transform the way we teach and learn.
My name is Lou Aronson. I'm the CEO and founder of Discourse Analytics. I have a somewhat unusual path into being the CEO and founder of an AI-based company that focuses in ed tech. I was a practicing lawyer for 20 some odd years. I did a lot in politics as part of my work, and I had this idea about starting a technology company that was a political social network. Our hypothesis was that issues mattered more to voters than demographics or party, that you don't vote for a particular person more often than not because of your demographics or the party you belong to, but the issue that matters most to you. Guns rights, women's gynecologic health, marriage equality, food, even the way we use some of the terms can indicate a preference for certain aspects of those issues. And I searched around about the topic and things of that nature for a couple of years while I was running my law firm. And then in early 2011, I met my co-founder, Vijay Parancherry, who is an applied mathematician. And Vijay explained to me, the guy who proudly got a 1 on his AP calculus exam in high school, how math and applied mathematics, not statistics, but math could be used to understand how people make decisions around politics. But what do we do? What is discourse analytics is the second part of that question. And DA, Discourse Analytics, is a little bit of a mouthful, so we call it DA. It's a prescriptive analytics company that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning that has been combined with things like cognitive science and behavioral economics to understand students using their mindsets, predict outcome, areas of mastery and progression, and then create nudges or data objects, which are calls to action to help the student progress and overcome those obstacles.
Maybe we could get concrete, can you give me an example of what this might look like, with a student?
One of the easiest ways to basically understand what it is that we do is most folks, I think, involved in this podcast are familiar with FAFSA verification in higher ed, right? The application process to get a student loan, okay? And the problem with FAFSA verification is roughly a third of all students who apply for federal aid get flagged for verification. Well, the process is so difficult or non-user friendly that roughly 40% of those people never complete their verification form and wind up dropping out of school because they don't get the money. So we were able to take 17 data points from one of our partner institutions, build attitudinal profiles on each of the students. Those students align to 3 primary think-alike clusters. We named them. We had the overwhelmed students, the procrastinators, and the overcommitteds. We then delivered targeted messages, so you can already imagine the message to a procrastinator is going to be much different to an overwhelmed student than an overcommitted student. We did an A/B test. The control group got the standardized message of you need to fill this stuff out. The test group got our targeted messaging, 2 messages a week for 3 weeks. And over 3 weeks, we improved completion, not just click-through and open rates, but the actual completion of the verification forms or uploads by 23%. So if you think about how it would work with a student, if a student, say, is struggling with social, emotional, or learning loss in a high school, I know that this is something that's obviously top of mind for all of us these days, that we find that there's a student who's seemingly socially disconnected, and that student has a nervous or a capricious or a fixed mindset, we would be targeting a message back to that student to possibly get more involved in clubs or activities at the school. Get more involved in maybe some outward-looking community-based activities to feel more connected. Connection is such an important part of the education experience. So we're able to understand. And then if the student's having academic struggles, we could direct them to, again, depending upon their profile, direct them to a self-help portal for tutoring, or go in to see the teacher for extra help. Imagine a student with a disorganized profile having academic problems. We could route her a piece of content from LinkedIn Learn on how to better manage your schedule. So that's how some of those pieces come into play. So almost think about it as a demographically unbiased recommendation engine like everybody experiences with Spotify, Hulu, Netflix, or Amazon. I think that one of the biggest things that I try to work towards when I talk to folks is demystifying this and understanding that, teaching's hard. It is. I have a lot of friends who are teachers. I spend a lot of time with teachers. And over the past 20 years, there have been billions of dollars invested in education, but outcomes haven't changed. So how can we allow teachers who have this desire to help people get educated do more? And part of this is also demystifying and making tools like ours less scary. It's not about replacing you. It's about augmenting you.
Especially when you have, I think the average number is, so if it's 30 kids-ish a class, an average teacher has 5 classes. That's 150 students.
50 students.
Mm-hmm. Which is a lot, for one person. And we hear often that teachers are incredibly overworked and stressed. And
if you just I know this isn't the case, but if let's just assume that a teacher taught 5 hours a day. That's 300 hours a day. Mm-hmm. 300 minutes a day, right?
Yeah.
300 minutes. That's 2 minutes per student. People don't scale, and computers don't have intuition. But where we've started to get to now is AI can allow us to start having intuition around that to then let people scale.
I'm Nikki Herda, and this is Bright, a podcast that's made possible by Michigan Virtual, a nonprofit organization that's leading and collaborating to build learning environments for tomorrow. Today, I'm chatting with Lou Aronson, the CEO and founder of a company called Discourse Analytics that is leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to analyze student behavior and offer suggestions to educators on how to meet student needs. Up next, we talk about Lou's favorite teachers, his vision for the future of learning, and what advice he has for educators who are curious about the potential applications of AI-based technology for the classroom. Can you tell me about who your favorite teacher was and why they were your favorite?
There were 3. I couldn't figure out which one was my favorite. There was Mrs. Kaplan, my AP English teacher in high school. There was Dr. Bach, who was my first-year writing professor at Michigan. And then there was Professor Lieberthal, who was the head of the Chinese Studies Department at the University of Michigan when I was there. And what struck me about all three of them was they knew me and they wouldn't let me cut corners. Because I was a corner cutter.
Is that what the if there had been a Discourse Analytics in your LMS?
If there was a synthetic profile for corner cutters, yeah, this was the guy who I was a good student, but they knew I could be better, and they challenged me to be better. They all taught me little different things that stick with me all the time in terms of how to not use passive voice and how to not use indefinite pronoun references and how to be very specific about the stories that I'm telling, why I'm telling them, how I'm telling them, and how I need to build an evidentiary foundation for the aspects of hypotheses. But they would not accept me not doing my best. And that was sometimes painful and didn't always result in the best grade. But in each one of those situations, I would say they were my favorite because they knew me and I believed that they cared. And that caring connection is one of the things that we see a lot of as being critical to unlocking improved outcomes.
What would you say is your vision for student learning? So if it were up to you, what would you want to see for every single student?
What I would like to see for every student is for the pathways for successful progression have as many barriers removed from it as possible, right? There aren't many people in this world who are luckier than me. I didn't grow up in the richest family. I grew up in a middle-class family in a nice neighborhood, right? Never wanted for anything. There was A's were expected. But if I wasn't getting an A, my parents would either sit me down, make me do my homework, get me a tutor. It wasn't if I was going to college. It was where I was going to college. It was, what are you going to be when you grow up? A doctor, lawyer, business, there were never any limiters around that, right? And when you think about food and finances and access to information, what I would love to be able to see is, and obviously I think a lot of this, because of the way I see the world, is driven by data, but that there's a framework in place that allows organizations and governmental entities to unlock the potential of an individual's data in such a way that can be beneficial to them at each stage along their pathway, so that there are resources that can be made available to them to remove obstacles when and if they appear, if those people don't have resources to remove those obstacles.
One thing that really struck me, when you were speaking earlier, especially now that I've had time to kind of let it percolate, is what you said about, you were talking about demographic information, right? And how, as humans, these things particularly may bias us. We may see a student in a particular situation and make some assumptions about their behavior, but you're saying this algorithm, I'm hesitant to use the term unbiased, but at least is differently biased. It's got a different set of criteria it's looking through and evaluating. So I think that's pretty fascinating to think of, being a teacher and having your own stream of information, like you said, through your own intuition and your own experiences and your own filter, and having the ability to at least look at the recommendations coming from this, less biased or differently biased system that's looking for different things.
So the one thing I would want to say about how does technology facilitate this vision? technology is only going to be as good as the people who are putting it into practice. But I would say that technology is a tool. You all are still the prime movers and deliverers or users of that tool. You put a carpentry hammer in the hand of a carpenter, and he's going to do some great work, like you can see in the back of your room there, right? You put that in my hand, it's going to look like Frankenstein's monster. It's just not going to do the same thing.
So if you were talking to a teacher and they were looking to dip their toes into the use of AI and data to advance student learning in their classroom, what kind of advice would you give them?
Don't be scared. Challenge yourself the way you challenge your kids. If you're a teacher of history and the kid isn't understanding what was taking place around the American Revolution, you'd have to break it down into digestible bites. What I would say to people is, do you have Amazon Prime? Do you watch Netflix? Have you ever accepted a recommendation from Amazon or Netflix on a product or a show? Have you ever clicked on a song that's been recommended to you by Spotify? That's a user experience that's being driven by data. We won't talk about Facebook and Instagram and some of the nefarious things around data and the way algorithms are working but like, you're experiencing data and AI and technology in almost every facet of your life. It's really interesting. One of Henry Ford's great lines was, if I had given my customers what they had wanted, I would have given them a faster horse. Elon Musk, on the other hand, has created a paradigm shift, whether you like him or not, in how we look at electric cars. So as teachers, you're sitting here at this really unique moment of time where you have an entire generation of what obviously are being referred to as digital natives who are raised with technology in their hand at every point in time. Start trying to meet them where they are. And by the way, your lesson plans can change. The technology will continue to adapt and get better. And you'll get more power out of it. You're the reason you pay $110 a year for Amazon Prime is you're getting value. And this is how cloud and data and AI and platforms, when integrated with responsible business process change, can really improve on a scalable, one-to-one, equitable basis, improved outcomes across both learning and social emotional loss issues and overall learner progression for a lifetime.
There's still so much uncharted territory in artificial intelligence that it's impossible to predict with any degree of certainty how it will impact any given industry, especially one as complex and essential as education. Lou is clear to say that when it comes to student learning, the best path forward is envisioning AI as a tool to augment teachers, not to replace them. After all, AI is already improving the user experience and recommendation systems in so many of our favorite online platforms. How could we leverage the power of this technology, he asks, to help teachers make an even greater impact on students' lives? Without a doubt, there are still many questions that need to be answered when it comes to the future of AI and machine learning in education. But with leaders like Lou forging our path forward, if there's one thing we're certain of, it's that the future is bright. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms. This podcast is produced by Herbie Gaylord, is hosted by me, Nikki Herta, and is shaped by many of our passionate and talented colleagues. Big thanks to Krista Green, Ann Perez, Ann Kraft, and Brandon Batista for their contributions to this episode. The Bright Podcast is made possible by Michigan Virtual, a nonprofit organization that's leading and collaborating to build learning environments for tomorrow. Education is changing faster than ever. Discover new models and resources to move learning forward at your school at michiganvirtual.org.